Hi, Jeremy here at Modern Vitality. In today's video, we're going to be discussing medicinal mushrooms, which are getting heaps of attention right now, and rightfully so. However, there's kind of a dark side to this and some things you need to be aware of, especially if you're starting to dip your toe into using medicinal mushrooms to heal yourself, right? If you're dealing with a complex chronic health condition, and you know this channel, we focus on Lyme disease and fibromyalgia and mold exposure and chronic fatigue syndrome and adrenal fatigue, long haulers, candida, reactivated Epstein-Barr, autoimmune conditions, you name it, right? All these modern kind of funky head scratcher conditions. This is where we focus. And if you're in one of those groups, you need to know some things that are kind of specific, because you don't want to be doing general health advice, right? Not that I'm going to give you health advice or medical advice, right? But I will open your eyes, okay, to some different ideas so that you can make adult decisions about your health and have a little bit more information behind you. So we're going to be looking at some of the kind of problems and pitfalls with some of the medicinal mushroom products and just some of the logistics, so you can make sure you're doing the right thing for your health and not wasting your time, not wasting your money, and not getting frustrated because something that should have worked didn't work. All right, I want to set you up for success. Let's get started. So the big elephant in the room, the first thing we need to get through here is dosage. Now with medicinal mushrooms, a lot of times if you're going to have them and you want them to have an effect that gets anywhere near what you've read about in studies, right, you need to have them dosed correctly. And oftentimes, unfortunately, a lot of the lifestyle products, as much as I love them personally, I enjoy these things like mushrooms with chocolate or cocoa mushrooms and all this kind of stuff. Anything add mushrooms, right? It's great. Some kind of morning drink you could have with mushrooms in it, mushroom coffee, all these things. Unfortunately, the dosage is very, very small on these kind of consumer products. And there are different reasons for that, right? One of them is the taste, because oftentimes medicinal mushrooms will taste like medicinal mushrooms. There's no way around that. And if you go to drink a mug of medicinal mushroom tea, it's going to be really, really gnarly tasting. That's just the way it is. So if we want to make a product that's got mushrooms and cacao and some different herbs and whatever else, the way you're going to do this and make it palatable for a consumer is to cut the mushroom dosage down significantly. So that's one thing to be aware of, is that we have, due to taste, right, and flavor, you're going to have lower dosage. And then also they'll lean towards lower dosage too because of liability. And, you know, it's not easy for a food or supplement manufacturer really, because if they put in, you know, substantial doses and something goes wrong, somebody might blame their company. But if they always have very low doses on their product, then they have that kind of liability shield, so that if something did go wrong, people wouldn't look at that and say, oh, it must have been that mushroom. And they can, you know, they can always say, well, the mushroom here is like a minuscule amount of dosage, right? So it's kind of unfortunate that a lot of these things, what it says on the label, like, sure, yeah, it does contain reishi mushrooms or chaga or lion's mane or whatever. Technically it has like some in there, but it's nowhere near the threshold for most people to start getting the beneficial effects. So that's one thing you need to think about. The other is cost, right? Because these mushrooms, if you get them at the right dosage, you know, you're not going to have a $3 cup of mushroom tea, right? It's probably going to be closer to like $10 or something like that, or depending what's in there. The cocoa, you know, if that's a really high grade, then you're going to have the cost goes up. So they have to find ways to get a little bit of the product in there, right? So that you can have some in there. But unfortunately, it's oftentimes not high enough dosed. And you know it's like high enough dosed if it tastes like very bitter and not pleasant to drink, right? So that's something to consider. Now, that's the one piece, is the dosage, right? Now, the other one is the actual mushroom itself. And here's where it gets really interesting for people with complex chronic health conditions, because if you have like an inflammatory process that's out of control, or you've got hidden pathogens, or you've got biofilm activity, or whatever you've got, right? Then your body is going to be working a little bit differently than the average human. Now, all these consumer products that are kind of marketed to the average person are set up so that they can benefit the average person, obviously, right? Sometimes that'll actually screw you up or work you backwards if you're trying to dig out of the pit of complex chronic health conditions. Like some of these mushrooms may be really beneficial if you're in more of a stage 3 or a stage 5 type of place in your healing. And what I mean by stage 3 or stage 5, well, if you haven't seen any of my other videos, I'm always talking about this, because when you go to take a complex condition apart and you want to really move through it, right? What you have to understand is that all the different body systems kind of lean on each other in the event of long-standing pathology, which is why we get symptoms that are all over the map. This is why most doctors can't stand these conditions and refer them out, because it's a complex mess, right? And for a doctor, especially an MD, especially in America, if they've got 3 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever it is to talk to their patient, that's not enough time unless they're specialized, in systems thinking to understand all this. But the best thing I've found to not have the blinders on, right? To see everything, but not get overwhelmed, is to actually take all of these problems and issues and start organizing them in stages. So the first stage is your immune system. Stage 2 is digestion. Stage 3 is neuroadrenal. Stage 4 is blood circulation. If you want to know more about this, go see my other videos where I get into this in depth. I'm always talking about this. It's very important. And it's something we do differently in modern vitality and in my world here is not a lot of people are thinking like this, right? I'm training more practitioners. there's people I mentor, I'm taking them through and they're understanding this. So I'm hoping to get more, you'll hear more people like talking about this in the future. It's going to become more widespread because the reality is if you want to handle a complex chronic anything kind of problem, especially a health problem, you have to understand all of the pieces, how they all interrelate, and then not get your brain blown open, right? By being able to just organize it so you can start to take it step by step. So that's what we do, right? That's our process. And when you're in stage 1 and you're working on your inflammatory processes in your immune system, that might not be the best time to be dabbling around with lion's mane, for example, right? Or some other medicinal mushroom that like lion's mane would be way better in stage 3 or stage 5 when you're working on neuroadrenals, because lion's mane has that kind of neuroprotective, possibly neurogenic property, right? Where we're seeing where it may be helping with things like that. But that's later. That's when you're doing nervous system, So if you start skipping steps, you won't get the best results. Unfortunately, we can't just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, because most times you're doing great things, but you're doing them at the wrong time. So when you start looking at, okay, medicinal mushrooms, I want to learn more about this. And by the way, I've got a video you can find about medicinal mushrooms. I've got a few that I've kind of highlighted that can be helpful for people with complex chronic health conditions, especially if you're kind of just starting out. Maybe this could guide your focus in terms of what you're researching next. But that's another big one, is that you want to make sure that you're looking at the actual mushrooms themselves, because they're not all the same thing, right? They have different kinds of effects and actions on the body. So you want to find the ones that fit where you are and when you are in your process. Okay. And then the third thing is the actual method of dosage and administration. And this is a bit of a detail. It's a bit of a nerdy kind of technical thing. But what I would offer you here is that a lot of these mushrooms have very hard cell walls, especially things like reishi mushrooms, turkey tail, these things that grow off of logs for the most part. Like lion's mane is a pretty relatively squishy one, but like reishi is pretty woody. And a lot of these mushrooms, because they have thicker cell walls and they're pretty tough, is you don't always get to extract the nutrition from them very easily. So you have to process them in a way where they'll kind of give up the goods in terms of all their active compounds that they have. And what that means, especially for reishi, because reishi is really popular now, which it should be. I love reishi mushrooms, love them. I'm constantly recommending them to people in the right phase, right, within their healing process. I love reishi mushrooms, but one of the issues here is that if you just get powdered reishi mushrooms, right, you take the mushroom and just grind it up, what's going to happen is you're going to ingest that powder and then you're going to poop it out. We don't have in our capacity, our digestive capacity, we don't have a lot to actually break down what we need to do with those. So what you'll see is a lot of times these products, and this is something to watch out for, and I'm not trying to like make problems for any brand, but hopefully if this information gets out and starts to evolve the industry, great. Because I'm not gonna name names or whatever. I actually love this whole movement. And after I talk about this part, I'll share with you, I think one of the benefits of this, even though they're underdosed and it's hard to get them extracted right, but I think there's something really important happening here with public consciousness. So extraction methods with reishis and things like that, you typically want to have combination, what they call a double extraction, which is you're going to be extracting with alcohol and you're pulling out all the alcohol soluble powerhouse chemicals, right? So you make a tincture, and then you would also, if you're doing this at home, this is what I do with my own ones at home that I go harvest, is pull out all the alcohol soluble stuff, then you strain out the dregs, right? The mushroom pieces after that, and then you take those and you boil them for a while, right? So now you're pulling out all the water soluble ingredients. And then you take the water that you've boiled out, you take the tincture you made, you mix those together, and now you've got what they call a double extraction. So you've got kind of the best of both worlds, and you've processed this thing to where it's a lot of the cell walls have been broken down, and the boiling helps and all this. So you're really extracting a lot of power out of the mushrooms that way. So one of the best ways, one of the most powerful ways to take medicinal mushrooms oftentimes is in a tincture or a double extraction form. So you're going to be taking the droppers, right? Usually those don't taste good, usually because they're stronger. Right? So if you're sensitive and you're working up your dosage, you may think, hey, I'll just eat this mushroom chocolate bar because Jeremy said it's very underdosed. So at least it's a way for me to dip my toe in this water and see if anything bad happens. Great, that's fine. You may want to take advantage of that. but also just know you're getting minuscule amounts, especially if it's reishi powder, not a reishi extract. Then you're basically just eating an underdosed powder that you can't really extract much out of in the first place. Now, there are other ways to do this too. Some people will just boil the mushrooms. And we have this in Eastern medicine, this kind of process of making granules where you'll take any kind of herb, but for our conversation here, you take a mushroom and you boil it, and you boil it for a while, and you pull out this broth of it basically. And then with that, if you want it to last a while and you don't want to use alcohol, then what you do is you take it and you kind of mix it with some kind of starchy binder. And some people even make dough, right? They'll make dough and they'll mix it, and then you can make these little dough balls, or you can even make honey pills, or you can just take it and like in a factory setting for granules, what they'll do is they'll mist you've just made all this mushroom broth basically, and they'll mist it into the air, and then they basically throw these little fine starchy particles up there, and they catch each other, and they kind of precipitate and fall down, and now you've got this starch that's like loaded up with mushroom extract. Those can work, right? Those can work really well. You'll get results from that. But just the rough powder is going to be very hard to actually extract a lot of the nutrients out like you would want to. So be aware, right? And these aren't hard and fast rules, but just be aware of that. And I'll tell you, I was talking to a shopkeeper, a friend of mine who keeps this kind of eclectic little imports shop. And we were talking about all these mushroom products, and she was showing me some of the stuff that came in. And it was like this, a bag of cocoa with, reishi mushrooms added to it. And I looked at the back of the package and I said to her, this is really awesome. Something you should know about this. And I told her about how they're underdosed and all that. And she said, yeah, I know, you get barely anything in there. But what's really great is that this is just a little foot in the door for the culture. And what she told me, because she's got a shop, where she's meeting people all the time, is that this is a great way for people who maybe wouldn't have been seeking out a tincture, a double extract, or an herbalist, or a healing protocol, or anything like that. But they wouldn't be seeking that out. But because they came for chocolate, right now they're getting turned on to this idea of mushrooms, even though it's not a huge dosage, right? But it's good to start opening the mind up. So why I'm saying this, because I'm not demonizing these companies. I don't think there's anything malicious going on. I think some of them, they may not know what the required or recommended dosage is to get an effect, or they do know and they're keeping it low to limit their liability, right? So it might be totally intentional, but also pretty compassionate and harmless, right? I don't think they're actively trying to take advantage of you or rip you off or whatever else. So you want to make sure that you're aware of this, right? Basically. And then the other thing too is like, what part of the mushroom are they using? Because you can technically say, oh, it's lion's mane mushroom, but it's the mycelium that's in like oats or something, right? So it's not the fruiting body or the big beautiful thing with all the icicle looking pieces coming off, right? It's not that. It's like a lot of oats with some basically mushroom roots in there. So you want to be aware of that too. Is it mycelium? Is it fruiting body? There's a lot of stuff to be aware of here. But the main thing I want to talk to you about was dosage. And just know that if you want to try medicinal mushrooms in a medicinal way, that what you've done, if you've tried an edible food product, probably doesn't check that box, right? That's just the reality of it. So if you're dealing with a complex chronic health condition, you want to make sure that you're not just taking general advice, that you're looking at things specific for you, and even beyond that, specific for you, where you are in your stages. Where are you at? Are you immune, digestive, neuroadrenal, blood circulation? Are you in like secret stage 5 where we do boosting and biohacking and optimization, right? Where are you in that progress? Because your mileage will vary. So if healing is important to you, just know you don't have to do this alone. We've got a great group. It's called Modern Vitality Solutions and Support. It's a chat group. We're off of big tech, which means we have our own private chat group. I can say anything I want without worrying about censorship, which is great. If you ask me any kind of question, I'm happy to share my perspective. It's unfiltered in there. I'll give you my full assessment on things. It's limited though. We have a small group. I try to keep it cozy. There may be a bit of a wait because I can't keep track of 10,000 people in there. I like to know who I'm talking to. So sometimes there's a wait. For new guests, it could be 2 weeks, 2 months, something like that. It's totally free to apply as a guest. You'll find your application link in the description below this video. And when I see your application, if you look like a fantastic fit for our international group, I will let you know as soon as I can, and we'll get you in there. In the meantime, you might consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel, or doing other things to train the internet algorithms to show you more stuff like this that's actually going to help you move your life forward. All right, let's get you feeling better. Cheers.